Thank you so much for being here. Today, we want to dispel some of the myths that people hear about super from time to time. My name is Janine Robertson. I'm the Education Manager here at smartMonday, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the many unceded lands from which we come together and pay my respects to Elders, past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining the session today. I'm coming to you today from Bidjigal country, and I am joined by my colleague Pat Howard, who is also on Bidjigal land. Hey, Pat.
Hey, Janine. How you doing?
Good
afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
So before we get into the details, a quick reminder that everything we're talking about today is general in nature and shouldn't be considered personal advice. We can't answer personal questions in a group forum like this, so a good rule of thumb is if your question starts with "should I," then that's something personal we won't be able to answer. However, you are very welcome to use the Q&A function and to ask questions. Pat is going to do his best to answer them as we go, or maybe make a note of the ones we might need to come back to at the end. So today's agenda is really simple. We want to uncover the truth about 10 superannuation myths. Sometimes I think we hear things from friends or family that might not be 100% accurate, and it can be really hard to know what to listen to and what to take on. So today is designed to give you some clarity and to debunk some myths. We also want to make sure that you have some action points and you know what to do next. We really value the time that you have taken to be here today, but we also know that what you do after the session is really important. So I hope that as we debunk some of our most common super myths, you'll be able to make a note of something that you can take away and act upon. I also did want to note there were a lot of really great questions submitted with your registration, so thank you to those people. We will do our best to answer as many as we can through the presentation, and there's a few that we might come back to at the end because they're a little bit more complicated. So if you don't feel like your question was answered at the end of the session, do please reach out. We'll have some contact details on the screen later in the session. So let's get started. Before we dive into the first myth, I just wanted to address a big question that I think almost everyone has asked at some point. Is super complicated? So for most people, the answer really is no. At its core, super is simply a structured way for you to save for your retirement and access those funds when you retire. It also operates in a low tax environment, which is helping your savings grow. And while the rules do shift, the basic purpose of super does stay the same. And I think when you focus on these principles, super can feel a little bit less intimidating. So keeping this in mind, it can help you feel a little bit more connected to your super and also more confident about your retirement planning. So with that in mind, let's move on to our first myth. Now, in the context of current global events and share markets, this myth does feel really relevant. Myth 1, when markets crash, I should change my investments. Now, there are a number of questions submitted on this topic. Questions about Trump, about impacts from the US, about balance fluctuations, and clearly in line with this myth, whether changing investment choices is a good decision. So what's the answer? Well, let's look at the data and the graphs because they can help. First on the left, this shows the ASX 200 over a 3-month period. And I think at first glance, the recent fluctuations do seem significant, perhaps even alarming. Recent global events have had a noticeable effect on Australian share markets, and since your super is invested in both Australian and international shares, this is impacting superannuation balances. But step back a bit and take a look at the larger graph on the right. This looks at a longer term trend over the last 20 years. And you'll notice that there's been many market dips that have happened many times before. But overall, if you look at the trend, it is positive across the longer term. So while no one can predict what will happen tomorrow or next year, our investment team do expect market fluctuations. They structure your investments and your super to perform over this long-term time horizon. Now, reacting to short-term market changes and changing investments goes against that long-term investment strategy that's super. Market fluctuations are normal and they are expected. But Pat, since we've had so many questions on this topic, do you mind just giving us some more insights? You're talking to members every day. So what are we hearing and what do we need to know?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Firstly, it's sensible that we've got a lot of questions on this at the moment, and we get them in our team all the time. We've got them for today from several people attending, so thanks for those. Main thing is that we really do. We expect these ups and downs. This is not unexpected. To put it in a sort of more recent time frame, we can look at a graph, but if we think 2018, none of us knew we were going to have a pandemic the next year. A few years later, Russia invaded Ukraine, and today here we've got a really big disruption coming from this new US administration, right? Where they've got policies and statements that could have extremely large impacts, but they change every other day. So that makes it really hard for investors at the moment, especially in US stocks. So we don't know what the next disruption will be, but we just know from history that it will come. So times like this, when it's hard to know what's going on, it's really important to focus on keeping that sort of long-term thinking hat on, because it's easy to get distracted by the craziness going on. We're getting asked a lot, what are we doing about it? And again, a really sensible question to ask. And it's important to think that our investments, we've been designed with times like this in mind. Our growth-oriented investments, for instance, they're designed to work over periods of 10 to 15 years, so quite long-term. So we don't rush out and make big changes at times like this because we've expected this to happen. But for members to know, we do make proactive choices as we go. And at the moment, we are acting a little bit more defensively compared to what we'd planned to in our allocations of our investments. But we still expect our investments to track the market broadly.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
So I think in summary, if you don't mind me wrapping that up, reacting to those short-term market changes really does go against the long-term investment strategy that's super. Excuse me. Your key action point for anyone listening in is if you're feeling concerned before you make a change to your investments, I really would encourage you to talk to an advisor. Our coach team contact details will be on the screen at the end of the presentation. Okay, moving on. Myth 2, can you contribute to super if you're not working? Yes, you can. So I'll give you a personal example. When I had a baby, I was on leave from employment. Could I contribute to super at that time? Yes. What if you are between jobs and for some reason you had money you wanted to add to super? Could you do that? Yes. Regardless of your work status, your spouse or your partner can also contribute to your super. They may be able to split their contributions or make an after-tax contribution. And another example is the downsizer contribution opportunity for people aged over 55. That's on the sale of a home. There are rules that apply to all types of contributions in super, but there's no work test that applies while you're growing your super account. So in summary, yes, you can contribute to super when you're not working. Excuse me. Okay, myth 3. My nominated beneficiary is guaranteed to get my super. And I think the key word in this myth is guaranteed, because the answer is not necessarily. Your beneficiary is only guaranteed to receive your super if you have a valid binding nomination. So let's take a look at what you need to know. Super doesn't automatically form part of your will. It's separate. There are 2 types of nominations: binding, which is when valid, it locks your choice in and the trustee must follow it. Excuse me. And a non-binding nomination. I've got a frog in my throat. Pat, do you mind just taking over for a moment?
But yeah, so when we've got the binding in place, as Janine was saying, that stays in place and the trustee has to follow it. And the non-binding, the trustee may have some discretion there as to what happens if you were to pass away. Now, the important thing that we have here is, when we get asked about a lot, is who can you nominate? And if you haven't nominated someone that's allowed to be nominated, the nomination would be invalid. But how you going there, Janine? Hang in there. So who can I nominate? Now, you can nominate your spouse or your partner. You can also nominate your children or dependents, and they can be adult children. They don't have to be under the age of 18, or your dependents, as I said, and also interdependents. So that can be someone that you have an independent relationship with. So it may be someone that you rely on financially, you live with, may not be your spouse or your partner or your children, but someone where you do have that interdependent relationship. Now, if you're not nominating someone that falls into one of these categories, you can nominate your legal personal representative. Now, that would be your estate, and that would mean your super goes to the estate and it's distributed in accordance with your will. Now, really, really important here, you do need to follow the rules. You can't nominate charities or pets or someone who's a long lost friend. They do need to meet the rules. Otherwise, the nomination will not be valid and what you ask for may not come.
Thanks, Pat. So it's really important to get on top of this and make a valid binding nomination. To do that, you do need to sign and witness a form. So it does take a little bit of effort, but it's not hard. And it is worth it because it really does lock in your decision. When you have a valid beneficiary nomination, the trustee must follow those wishes if it is binding. So as Pat said, if you did want to nominate someone that wasn't on that list, you can nominate your legal personal representative, and then you need to have a will in place, and that's going to specify where you want that money to go. So your action point here is, if you haven't reviewed your nomination recently, I really encourage you to jump into the Smart Monday portal and check it. You can see your beneficiary nominations when you log in, and you can also see whether they are binding or non-binding. So check them and then make sure you post us that form to ensure that it's valid and binding. And before we move on to the next slide, I did just want to answer another question that we received on this topic, which was, can we pay super to pay a super benefit, I should say, to relatives that are living overseas? Now, the answer to this one is, assuming they're a valid person, as we just identified, then they don't have to reside in Australia. However, the benefit can only be paid to an Australian bank account. So if your relative is overseas and not one of the valid options, the best thing to do would be to nominate your legal personal representative and have a will in place. Okay, next. Consolidating funds isn't worth my time. It isn't worth the effort. Think you can put this one off because maybe you've got lots of years before you're going to retire? Well, I would encourage you to think again. Consolidating super funds is relatively simple. It is worth your time because multiple accounts could mean that you're paying unnecessary fees, and this can reduce retirement savings. So 23% of Australians have more than one super account. So if that's you, it is time to take action. Now, if you are consolidating, be aware of a couple of things. The insurance cover that you have in the fund that you're leaving could be cut off. So applying for new cover with Smart Monday or rolling your existing cover into Smart Monday is a possibility. So consider those. If you do have a pre-existing medical condition, I think it's really important to pay attention to your insurance in super. And you should also pay attention to the different fees, costs, and other information relating to each fund before you consolidate. Now, if you were thinking, that's good, I've got my super in control, I've only got one account, I just want to flag that lost super is another issue that is worth checking in on. The ATO is holding $17.8 billion in lost super, and I think that's over 7 million accounts. So it is worth doing a search, and you can do that through MyGov. It is worth the time that it will take you. If you find some extra money, that'll be a bonus. So you can do that through your MyGov account. You can also consolidate when you log into your Smart Monday account. You can look for the tool for consolidation. And a little bit of good news to wrap this one up. Super funds generally can't charge an exit fee when you're rolling over your super. So that's a good thing to note as well. Now, we did receive a question on this one about rolling over money from a self-managed super fund into Smart Monday. And I want to reassure anyone that's thinking about that, Smart Monday can accept those contributions, but the process of winding up that SMSF does include a few steps. So just speak to your accountant or financial advisor to initiate that process. Okay, myth 5. We often have members who want to take control over their investments. Can they do that in Smart Monday, or as this myth suggests, do you need to have a self-managed super fund to do that? Well, the answer is you can take control of your investments in Smart Monday. You don't need a self-managed super fund to take an active role in those choices. I should acknowledge that a self-managed super fund, and you might see that abbreviated to SMSF, it really could allow you to get into the nitty-gritty with your investments. And for some people, that might be the right choice. But unless your balance is quite high and you want to take that really active role in your investments, a standard fund like Smart Monday can be a really great choice, because we do have an investments team that are helping you diversify across your investments, manage risk, and an advice team to support your choices too. So most super funds have investment options that you can select for Smart Monday. You can make changes by logging into your account and choosing the button that says Manage Investments. Now there's more information on the website about all your investment choices, but you can make changes at any time. You can choose where you want your current balance or future deposits invested. You can mix and match amongst the options, and you can see them listed on your screen. And you can also choose to leave a balance in the My Super option, and we'll look after those investments and take away a bit of the risk as you get closer to retirement. So do you need to have self-managed super fund to take some control of your investments? Nope, you don't. Okay, we are halfway through. Hoping my voice holds out. Here is a summary of what we have covered so far. As I mentioned, I really would love it if you had an action point at the end. So if something has jumped out at you, please take a note. Pat, is there anything in the chat that looks like we need to get an answer to straight away?
No, there's not. So we're doing a great job of answering all those questions that came in. So thanks for me.
All right, let's keep going then. So myth 6, I think this one's a bit of an extension of the last one. You have control over your investments and you have the ability to consider what type of investments you prefer. And I think it's worth noting the money in your super has power. It has the power to have impact, and what it funds really does matter. But does choosing responsible or ethical investing mean lower returns? Well, put simply, the answer is no. In super, delivering positive financial outcomes for members is always the number one priority. Impact investing doesn't mean leaving returns on the table. It's about acknowledging that it's possible to have a positive impact and generate returns. Super funds are increasingly excluding gambling, tobacco, weapons, and fossil fuels from their investments. Why? Because those companies are reliant on addiction and harm to people and the planet for profit. So where do we stand at Smart Monday? Well, we don't believe that the fossil fuel industry is aligned with a sustainable future, and screening work is underway as a long-term work in progress. So this means we're gradually evolving our investments with care and attention, because your super deserves that. So our most recent newsletter, which you should have received in your emails in the last month, it talks about a few of these investments and how your super will have impact. Now, remember, our investments team does have a range of tools available to them. They use these tools to look after your super. So all funds have these available, and the way they put them to use is really up to each fund. So we understand the responsibility that we have. We really do, to make the right decisions for members and for your financial future, as well as making responsible, impactful choices for better outcomes in the long term. So you can see more information about how we invest on the Smart Monday website. All right, next up, myth 7. Salary sacrifice is only worthwhile if you earn a high salary. Now, I've heard a few other ones like this. Things like, I don't need to think about super until I'm much older, or my employer pays super, so I don't have to. Let's clear this one up straight away by saying that no, salary sacrifice is not something that's only for high income earners. In fact, high income earners with a salary over $250,000 might have a limited ability to access salary sacrifice due to the before tax or concessional caps. So before I talk more about salary sacrifice, I do think it's worth just acknowledging everyone's financial situation is different. And in the current cost of living issues that we've been seeing, and crisis, if you want to use that word, will be impacting us in different ways. Regardless of where you stand, understanding salary sacrifice, it's really worthwhile because it helps you make an informed choice. So salary sacrifice, what is it? It's adding some of your pre-tax income from your wage to your super. And that means you're giving up a little bit of your salary now for your retirement income. And it also means if you stay under the limit, you can pay the super tax rate of only 15% on that portion of your salary. So that could be a lot lower than your marginal tax rate. Now, you don't have to contribute a large amount. You don't have to be any particular age to start doing this. Any contribution you make will help grow your super balance. Now, salary sacrifice, it's not compulsory like your employer contributions. So your employer is paying super at a minimum rate of 11.5% at the moment, and that's rising to 12% at 1 July. You can add to super from your pre-tax income, but there's a limit of $30,000 per financial year, and that includes your employer contributions. So the limit means people earning those high salaries have a really limited opportunity to salary sacrifice because their employer contributions will take them close to that $30,000 limit. Is salary sacrifice worthwhile? Another word in that myth. Ultimately, look, it's a choice that only you can make, but just don't assume you need to be earning a high income, and starting small really could be a choice to consider. So this might be an action that you want to take and add to your list, whether it's to go ahead and make a change or just investigate a little further. Putting salary sacrifice in place is done through your HR or payroll team. And we did have a few other questions about salary sacrifice that we're going to come back to at the end. So if you did submit one of those, stick around, and I'm just going to keep going with myth 8. This is a quick one. I have to change super funds when I change jobs. No, you don't. You can stay with your fund if you change employment. And when you start a new role, you simply tell your employer your existing super fund information, and you do that by completing a choice of fund form, and they're available on our website and also through the ATO. Okay, number 9. Now, one of the first things I said today was that super is not too complicated, and I don't want to go back on that statement, but super is not only for retirement, and there are other ways you can use super if you want to. Most people have some kind of insurance. Super gives you access to the First Home Super Saver scheme, meaning you can grow savings for a first home purchase. There is sometimes an ability to access super in cases of financial hardship. Now, the rules there can be quite strict, but super can be used in those circumstances sometimes. Transition to retirement. It's a great way to access your super tax-free once you're over 60 while still contributing. So it can help you boost your super balance, and it is something that's worth investigating if you're near or over 60. A little flag here that we do expect one of our next webinar sessions to be focused on retirement planning and transition to retirement. So our final myth, number 10, is one that I think most people will have heard, and it's about that question: how much do we need? Do we need $1 million to retire? So straight up, no, you don't. You don't need $1 million to retire. And don't let this type of number that just gets thrown about in the media scare you. I think we're all different. We all have different retirement plans. And $1 million, it can just feel like a really frightening figure. I think many people will really struggle to reach it. But the list is long as to how you would determine and what would influence your retirement income needs, and therefore what balance you might be aiming for. So how do you come up with that number? I would suggest using the retirement calculator. So we do have some on our smartMonday website. There's also the Government Money Smart website. Calculators help you because they can help you look at your life expectancy and something called run out age. So that's when you might run out of super money, and you can put your own dollar figures in there. So you can look at things like the contributions you're making, how much you're earning, your current balance, your current age. You can also add things like salary sacrificing and see how that it changes things over time. You can put a spouse in, you can change your retirement age. So they're not an exact science, but they are a really great starting point and to give you an idea of kind of where you stand and where you're trying to get to. And I think it can help remove that stress of needing $1 million as well. Or I guess on the flip side, could also help you reach $1 million if that was your goal. Another way to think about how much you need to retire, assess your spending and your budget. It can be helpful when you're looking at those calculators and thinking about how much you might spend when you're in your retirement years. And then, of course, considering financial advice. It's a great way to get closer to your super and retirement planning. Now, this myth is a bit of a hard one to debunk. You know, some people might want $1 million, but we're all different. And the ASFA numbers suggest that about 600,000 is a bit more relevant for for the average Australian. And that suggests a retirement age of 67. So how much is enough? I think it's a question we all have, but don't let this idea of $1 million put you off engaging with your super because it feels in some way unattainable. I think that this type of myth and number thrown around, it can kind of do more harm than good. So if that's been something that's been holding you back, I really would encourage you to let that go because engaging earlier could make a real difference. Now, we did have a few questions submitted on this topic, and we're going to address those in a moment. So you can see a summary of the final 5 here on your screen. Hopefully we have debunked some myths you might have heard. Let's make sure you have an action point. I always suggest starting by just making sure you can log in. You've done that recently and all your contact details are up to date. Some of the other actions we talked about: salary sacrifice, beneficiaries, other ways to use your super, retirement planning, calculators, advice. Please do take a moment and consider an action. Engage with your super. It is such an important part of your overall financial picture. So next up, I have the coach contact information. So Pat, I might hand over to you for this one and give my voice a break as well. And I'm also going to bring up a couple of polls that I'd be really grateful if people could answer. So Pat, over to you. I'll bring those up and then we'll jump into some of the questions.
Yeah, great. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Janine. And look, just for anyone to put a question in the Q&A, we'll come to those just after this, so don't think I'm ignoring them. Some really good questions there. Now, as Janine's alluded to, we've got coaching in Smart Monday, and what that means is that you have access to a team that can give you advice around your Smart Monday account. So, hang on. What's come up in my way? So help you plan how you make your contributions. I can see we've got a question from in the chat around contributions and explaining different contributions. That's something where you could engage a coach to start planning and understanding the contributions that you can make. The government co-contribution that's there for you, understanding how retirement works, the investment options we've got that are available. And as we think back to the first slide, we spoke about, hey, should I change my investments or not? What's right for me? Having those conversations to give you some guidance there, understanding your beneficiaries, making sure that's sorted out, all the way through to planning for retirement, understanding how pension works, how you get to that, and how to set yourself up for that retirement that you're really interested in. So that's available for all Smart Monday members. There's no additional cost for that because it's part of your membership. So we'd really encourage you, if you've got questions on your mind from today, if you haven't put them in the chat or they're percolating, to reach out to the team because we're here to help you out every single day of the year. The contact details are on the screen there. And what I'll do is I'll also put in the chat, there's a little link where you can book an appointment to speak with one of us if you'd like to, because at the end of the day, it's your super. And if we can help you get the best out of it and make it work for you, then that's a fantastic outcome. That's what today's all about. I'll put that link in now.
Beautiful. Thanks, Pat. Okay, so we did have a bunch of questions come in before, as we've mentioned. I might just wrap up some of the ones about contributions. We kind of combined a few of them into one question. Who do I contact to increase my super payments and what are the limits that apply? Pat, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, give me one moment. I'll put this little
Oh,
thing in. I
sorry, I'll
can't
go ahead then.
multitask. That's above my current level.
Okay, so if you did want to make before tax contributions like salary sacrifice, you need to contact payroll or HR. The limit for those, including your employer contributions, is 30,000. If you wanted to make after tax contributions, you can log into your super account and access the BPay details. The limit for that is 120,000 per financial year. So there are other opportunities to use catch-up rules and bring forward contributions and things. So if you were looking at going over those limits, I would suggest speaking to a coach to get some more information. Pat, when does the fund pay 15% tax on super contributions? Is it when the funds come in or at the end of the financial year?
Okay, that's an easy one. So as your contributions come in from your employer each month or quarter or whatever it might be, they're taxed at that time. So if you're unsure about that, if you do log into your account, you'll see a transaction history. And what you'll find is when you see the transactions and the contributions come in, shortly after those, you'll see that there's also a transaction of the tax being deducted.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have you got a question there, Pat, that you want to jump on?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Look, I might grab one of the ones out of the chat. Okay, so what have we got? Okay, so someone did have a good question when we were talking about the nominations. Julie asked, where on the website can she check if she's set up a binding nomination? So you need to log in, and if you go to your insurance details, that'll show you whether you've got a nomination in place. And if you do want to make a nomination on the website, if you haven't got one, you can make what's called the non-binding nomination, which we spoke about. And if you want to put in place the binding nomination, then you can complete the form and send it into the fund. That's a good question. Thanks, Julie.
Beautiful.
What other ones we got there, Janine, from beforehand?
I've got one here. Should I reduce my insurance cover in super as I approach retirement? And one that was actually the opposite. We had a second question. Can I increase my insurance amount? And I'm 58. So how does insurance work, Pat?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, cool. To go back to the original one, like, should I do this? I think then we've got the following question. So we've got someone that wants to maybe decrease their insurance and someone that wants to increase it. That really highlights that there's no right or wrong. So everyone's going to have their own situation. What should you do? If you're not sure, reach out to a coach. But can you? Yes. So if you're heading towards retirement, you may choose to reduce your insurance. It'll depend on your personal circumstances. But generally, as people approach retirement, they may be carrying less debt or have less dependents. So it may be a situation where that cover that was more appropriate earlier in life, there may be less responsibilities to address if the worst was to happen. So yeah, a lot of people do make a choice like that, but everyone's circumstance is different. May have significant debts or dependents. It may be appropriate to increase insurance at that stage of your life. So there's no right or wrong. Can you do that? Yes, you can. In Smart Monday, you can apply to increase or decrease your cover. And that might be potentially up until the age of 70 even, depending on which cover you've got and what you want to do. There are limits, but yes, you can ask. Look at that for you. Probably also really important to point out to people that may not realise that if you've joined Smart Monday and you're with the employer that joined you, you'll be joined to an insurance plan that will actually decrease over time as you do move towards retirement. That'll happen automatically. So it might have happened for you. You might have even realised, or you might not realise that it's going to make that choice for you. If you join with the employer and then you've since left that employer, you've stayed with Smart Monday, the level of insurance that you had on the day you left the employer becomes what they call fixed, so it will stay the same. So depending on your work and employment circumstances with Smart Monday, your insurance may change over time or it may stay the same. So just keep that in mind. And then if you do want to make a change, you can reach out to the fund to make that request.
Awesome. You can check your insurance cover by logging in as well. You can see that's pretty easy to find on the website when you log in. All right. I've got another one here. Can I use my super to buy an investment property? So the answer to this one is no within your Smart Monday account. Now, there are cases where you can use an SMSF to buy property, but as we mentioned before, it's complicated and you'd need a lot of careful consideration and certainly comprehensive financial advice. Now, the question, Pat, what would be a good amount to aim for if I want to retire at 65?
Yeah, okay. More the better. But no, well, I think that maybe ties into the last slide a bit when we spoke about, do I need $1 million to retire, right? If you think about the things you were talking about there, is like, well, yes, no, maybe, depends on who we are, right? So look, if you think to retire at 65, firstly, fantastic, and it's great that you've got a plan, an action point, and you've got a goal already in mind that you want to work towards, because it means you can take action to do it. But in terms of how much should you have, so ASFA, the Association of Super Funds of Australia, they do publish yearly sort of like a retirement guideline, or not guideline, but sort of insight for superannuation as what might be a comfortable amount to have when you retire. They publish that for age 67. So if you're looking to retire at age 65, you might want to have a little bit more than they have, because you've got a few years to bridge. Now, they publish for couples and singles, and I've got a note here. So we're saying from 595,000, they say, for a single, and 690 for a couple, retiring at age 67. Now, they assume home ownership, and they're also taking into effect and into consideration how the government age pension will interact with your retirement as well. So you could look at that as a guide. You could use calculators, or you could reach out to a coach to get advice, because everyone's retirement goal is going to look a bit different. So a really long non-answer, but there's so much to unpack there. It's a good question.
Yeah. All right. This is one that's pretty short. When can I access my super?
Yeah, okay. Super common question that we get, maybe the most common question that we get when people reach out to us. So from age 60, and I'm going to say, prefacing that we're talking about retirement, you haven't had some unfortunate, medical issue or some kind of hardship, but from age 60, you can access your super. There's a few caveats there. If you end an employment agreement or you retire, let's say 60th birthday, then you can access your super fully. There's no restrictions there for you. However, if you continue to work, you can access your super with no conditions from age 65, assuming that you didn't end an employment relationship somewhere in between. Now, there's another way that you can start accessing super from 60, which is what's called a transition to retirement, which you did mention briefly. And we did have another question on that. I know we did. Someone asked to sort of explain a bit about that. So I'll probably flag that now if people aren't sure what that is. Basically, an opportunity to take some of your super and you put it into a little separate account called a transition to retirement account, and that pays you a tax-free pension even though you're still working if you're over 60. Now, some restrictions on that. There's a minimum amount that you can put in and the most that you can take out as well. So you can't access all your super, but it's a good way to start accessing your super maybe before you've retired, to start funding a bit of a move away from the workforce, or do some things on the house, or start having a bit more of a lifestyle before you have fully retired. But yeah, from age 60 and up, that's when it starts to happen. You need anything, reach out.
Yeah, I would say if you are near that age and you're thinking about retirement or transition to retirement, really do reach out to the coach. It's a really great opportunity to have a conversation with them. We received some questions as well about retirement and age pensions. Does your whole super balance need to be used up to be eligible for an age pension? And then another one, is your super taken into account for an age pension test? So I think I'll quickly take this one, Pat, if you like. Yes, your super is taken into account when determining if you're eligible for an age pension. So there's an assets test, there's an income test, and they both apply, and your super does form part of that. But you may be eligible for a full or a part pension even if you do have a little bit of super. And there's lots of minimums and rules and restrictions, but note that the age pension comes into play from age 67. So if this is something that you're thinking about and you're wondering if you would be eligible, once again, reach out to the coach team. They can talk to you about your super balance and pensions and interactions between those things. There was another question there about TTR that you have answered. Have you got any more there in the chat?
Yeah, we've got a few in the chat. There was a couple that were the same question, which is really cool. So I'm just going to go through the chat top to bottom, and I'll just adjust them. First one we got from Rod, and now Rod, I'm not going to address this one here because it's probably a bit of a can of worms, but I really invite you to reach out to us and you can ask for me, we'll have a chat about it. But Rod's question was just simply can we expand on contributions to super if not working versus casual, if pre-retired or retired? So there's a lot of this, then that, and it's almost 4 questions. So I think we've answered some of that already now. But Rod, if you want to reach out to us, I'll take you through all of that. No problem. We can ask as many questions as you like. Now, we had a couple of people ask whether they and their spouse, when they retire, combine their supers together. The answer to that is no. Those accounts are attached to you as an individual. When you retire, for instance, the age pension does take into consideration your total family circumstances, but can you combine those together? The answer is no. We had a question regarding someone's child. They asked if they've got a 15-year-old child working 20 hours a week, can they open a super account? Yes, they can, but their employer is not obliged to pay them super unless they're working 30 hours a week. So keep that in mind. We had a question. I've got scrolling through here. How often do we need to renew a binding nomination? Really good question. In Smart Monday, it's every 3 years, and we'll send you a renewal notice prior to that. So you don't need to remember. We will remind you, and the renewal notice is effectively an opt-in. So you don't need to go and get witnesses and the like if you're just renewing it. But if you are changing it, you will need to submit the form again. Always keep in mind, if your circumstances change, also remember to update it because we won't know. We had a couple of people ask, there's a good one as well, can they nominate their parents as a beneficiary? Again, the answer to that one is no, they don't qualify as a dependent for superannuation. Blaze through those because there's a couple of yes and no's there. Layla asked a great question, again, which we do get asked. And the question was, why is my super balance between the ATO, so logging into your ATO via MyGov, why is that balance difference between that and the super fund? And there's a really simple answer for that, is that as a fund, we report your balance to the ATO once a year. We do that after the end of the financial year. So the balance that we report to the ATO will be your end of financial year balance. And we only do that once. So for effectively the rest of the 12 months, your balance isn't going to accurately reflect what your balance is in Smart Monday because it's not reported live. So if you want to know your live balance, log into your account and check it. That's the source of truth. Or if you don't have a login, just reach out to us. Okay, and then the last question I've got here was from Paul. He asked why there was a lag between the deduction from his salary to show in the super fund. Now, I left that to last because I can't really answer that, but there are processing delays. It goes from your employer to a clearinghouse, then comes into the fund, then gets allocated to the account, and each of those steps do take a little bit of time. It's not just simply a direct bank transfer from one bank to another. I don't profess to know all the ins and outs of that. Best answer I can give.
I've got another one here too, Pat. I think this is another common one that we get. Should I pay off my mortgage or add to my super? And the answer for that one is it's a really personal decision, and it is something we want to run a session about in the future. So do keep an eye out for future sessions. Have you got any more there?
No, look, I think that was the lot. They're all really excellent questions. So thanks to everyone for those, and I hope we've answered them. But if you haven't, please reach out to us.
So thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate your time. I really do hope you've got something to act upon and take away from the session. Thank you to the Smart Monday team who, helped pull things together. Really grateful for everyone's time today, and hope to see you again soon.